Mary was only 17. She had no mother, no family to protect her, and no one to stand between her and the cruelty of the man who called himself her stepfather. The ranch that once felt like home had become her prison. The ropes cut deep into her skin. Her wrists burned as the coarse fibers bit into her flesh. Her legs were stretched against the old wooden fence, leaving her helpless in the scorching sun. Every breath came with pain. Every heartbeat carried the weight of fear. She was too young to understand why life had turned into this nightmare. Too young to fight against a man who had years of power and bitterness on his side. He struck her when she refused to sign over the ranch papers. He cursed her when she cried. He told her she was worthless, that she was just a burden, that without him she was nothing. Each word cut deeper than the rope. Each slap left more than a bruise on her skin. It left scars on her spirit. Mary felt her childhood slipping away, piece by piece, replaced by terror and silence. She had learned to hide her tears, to bite her lips until they bled, to keep her screams buried inside, but on this day, she could not hide anymore. Her voice broke the air with desperate cries. She screamed for help, even though she no longer believed anyone would come. Her throat was dry, her voice cracked, but she still called out, clinging to the faintest hope that someone, anyone, might hear her. The sun beat down without mercy. Sweat and blood mixed on her skin. The dry grass around her seemed a whisper of death. Her stepfather's shadow loomed in her memory, a reminder that the torment would never end unless she gave him everything her mother left behind. She closed her eyes, thinking of her mother's smile, the way the ranch once felt safe, the way laughter once filled the air. Now all that remained was dust, ropes, bruises, and the cruel laughter of a man who saw her suffering his power. Mary's body trembled with exhaustion. Her spirit wavered on the edge of breaking. The ranch was slipping from her hands, her future stolen before it even began. She was a child forced into a world of violence and despair, chained by the greed of a man who was never truly family. Her cries echoed across the empty fields, birds startled from the fence posts. The wind carried her voice far beyond the ranch, but would it reach anyone who cared? Would it reach a soul brave enough to challenge the cruelty that held her captive? Mary's lips quivered as the last ounce of strength left her body. She whispered into the sky, a final plea for salvation, not even knowing if anyone would hear. Her heart raced, not from hope, but from the terror of being forgotten. And then the question hung heavy in the air. If no one came to save her now, how long could she survive in the hands of a man who would stop at nothing to take her land, her dignity, and her life? The sound of hooves broke the silence of the afternoon. John Carter had been riding through the dry fields, just another day under the wide blue sky, when something caught his ear. It was faint at first, almost like the wind playing tricks, but then he heard it again, a cry, not the cry of an animal, but the raw voice of a young woman in pain. John pulled his horse to a stop, his brows furrowed as he turned his head toward the sound. There was a weight in that cry, a kind of desperation a man does not ignore. Not if he has any piece of a soul left. He nudged his horse forward, slow and cautious. The grass crunched beneath the hooves, the air heavy with dust and heat. As he got closer, his eyes narrowed, and then he saw her. Mary. A girl tied cruelly to the fence, her arms bound, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Her body bore the marks of violence, her spirit the scars of betrayal. For a moment, John's heart clenched so tight he thought it might stop. He had seen his share of suffering in the West. He had fought men, buried friends, and watched the cruel hand of fate tear apart families. But there was something different here. This was no outlaw ambush, no accident of nature. This was evil done by choice. Mary lifted her head at the sound of the horse. Her eyes widened, shimmering with both fear and the fragile spark of hope. Her lips moved, trembling. She begged him without words, just through that broken stare. John slid off his horse and walked closer. The red scarf around his neck shifted in the wind as he crouched down to meet her gaze. His voice was rough, but steady. "You're safe now, girl. I've got you." Her shoulders shook, half from relief, half from the terror of what might come next. John pulled out his knife, the blade catching the sunlight, and began cutting through the ropes. Every fiber snapped with a harsh sound like the breaking of chains. Mary winced as the blood returned to her hands, but she held back her cries. She did not want to seem weak, not in front of this stranger who had already done more for her than anyone else had in years. As the last rope fell away, John steadied her with a firm hand. She leaned against him, her body trembling, and in that moment, he made a silent promise. No man with honor could walk away now, but just as relief began to settle, the earth itself seemed to hold its breath. Because in the distance, a shadow still lingered, the kind of shadow that never lets go so easy. Would this rescue truly be the end of her torment, or was it only the beginning of a darker fight yet to come? The ropes were gone, but the fear still clung to Mary like a second skin. Her hand shook as she tried to steady herself. John kept his arm firm around her, guiding her toward the horse. "Easy now," he said, his voice calm, like he was talking to a spooked animal. "Breathe. You're still here, and he's not going to touch you again, not while I'm around." Mary wanted to believe him. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words, but all that came out was a whisper. It was him. "My stepfather. He wants the ranch. He won't stop." John's jaw tightened. He had seen greed turn men into monsters before, but there was something especially rotten about a man who preyed on his own family, and he looked into Mary's eyes, saw the terror there, and felt his own blood heat. "Listen to me," he said. "You're not alone anymore. Whatever he thinks he owns, he's wrong. That ranch is yours, and he's got no right to take it." Mary's tears spilled over, not just from fear, but from hearing words she had longed for. Someone was standing on her side at last. John helped her onto the horse. She clung to the saddle horn, weak but determined to hold herself upright. With one swift motion, John swung up behind her. Steady and protective, the horse started forward, carrying them both away from the fence, away from the shadow of Hank's cruelty. The ride was quiet, save for the creak of leather and the pounding of hooves. Mary leaned back slightly, trusting the man she had only just met, because in her heart she knew he was her only chance. They reached the ranch house as the sun began to dip. The wooden boards creaked under their boots as John carried her inside. The air smelled of dust and old wood, but here at least. She was free from the ropes. John set her down gently, fetched water, and cleaned the cuts on her arms. His hands were rough, but his touch was careful, almost fatherly. Mary watched him, wondering why this stranger cared more for her safety than the man who was supposed to be family. The night settled around them, quiet but heavy. Mary sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket. John leaned against the wall, eyes sharp, as if he knew the fight wasn't over, because out there, somewhere in the dark, Hank was still breathing, and men like him never quit so easy. The question now was simple but terrifying. Would Hank come back stronger, or would the law of the West finally catch up to him? Before we find out what happens next, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the rest of this story. And while you're here, take a sip of tea, settle in, and tell me in the comments what time it is where you're watching and where you're tuning in from. The night settled heavy over the ranch, warm and restless. Mary sat close, her blanket pulled tight, her eyes still heavy with fear. John stayed by the door, arms crossed, listening to every sound outside. He knew men like Hank. They never walked away after being shamed. They always came back, and sure enough, the silence broke with the sound of boots on gravel. Then came the creak of the ranch gate, slow, deliberate. Mary froze, her breath caught in her chest. John's hand went to the pistol on his belt. The door rattled as Hank's voice tore through the night. "You can't hide her from me, old man. That ranch is mine, and so is everything on it." Mary's eyes filled with tears, but this time she did not cower. She stood, trembling but fierce, her voice rising from a place she never knew she had. "You're lying. Mama left it to me. You'll never take it. Not again." The door burst open. Hank stormed in, his eyes bloodshot, his fists clenched. Drunk on rage, he lunged for Mary, but John stepped between them, his frame steady like a wall of oak. The two men clashed, fists meeting flesh, boots scraping against the wooden floor. The table tipped over, the lantern swung wildly, shadows leaping across the walls. Mary pressed against the corner, her heart pounding as the fight raged before her eyes. Hank swung hard, but John dodged, landing a punch that sent Hank stumbling. Still, Hank came back, fueled by greed and fury. John's years showed in his face, but his strength was still there, his spirit unbroken. Each strike was not just for Mary, but for every innocent soul who had suffered under men like Hank. The struggle shook the small room until finally John forced Hank down, pinning him to the floor. The pistol clattered away, and the fight turned to raw will. John's voice was low, sharp. "Your time's up. You're finished here." Mary stepped forward, her legs shaking, but her eyes blazing. She looked down at the man who had tormented her and spoke with a strength he could not break. "You will answer for what you've done. Not to me, not to him, but to the law." For the first time, Hank's eyes flickered with fear, because he knew the truth. In the West, a man could run from his enemies, but he could not run forever from justice. The question now was simple. Would the law of the frontier finally bring Hank to his knees, or did he still have one last card to play? The dawn came slow over the ranch, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Hank was no longer the shadow that haunted Mary's nights. With John by her side, the lawmen of the county rode out and took him into custody. The evidence of his cruelty, the bruises, the neighbors who had heard her cries, and his own drunken rage spoke louder than any excuse he could make. For the first time in years, Mary felt the weight lift from her chest. The ropes were gone, the fear was broken, and in its place came something she had not felt in a long time: hope. Life on the ranch did not turn easy overnight. There were fields to mend, fences to fix, and nights when the silence still made her heart ache. But she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and she had John, the man who had stood between her and destruction, the man who had shown her that justice still lived in the West. John stayed on the ranch for a time, helping her mend what had been broken. He taught her how to ride with confidence, how to shoot straight, and most of all, how to stand tall in the face of fear. Mary, once a frightened girl of 17, slowly grew into a woman of strength and fire. She carried her scars with dignity, not as marks of shame, but as proof that she had endured. The seasons passed. The ranch began to thrive again. Mary managed it with a steady hand, surprising even herself with how much she could handle. And all the while, John remained close, watching her rise from the ashes of her past. Their bond deepened, not in haste, but with the steady patience of time. What began as gratitude blossomed into a quiet, enduring love. It was not the love of a fairy tale. It was stronger. It was born from pain, from struggle, from the simple truth that two souls can find each other, even in the harshest of lands. And when Mary finally smiled again, it was a smile that carried both sorrow and joy, a smile that said she had been broken but not destroyed. Now, think for a moment. How many of us have faced our own Hank in life? Maybe not a man with fists and ropes, but the weight of cruelty, greed, or betrayal. And when the world felt hopeless, did someone step in to remind us we were not alone? The story of Mary and John is more than a tale of the West, and it is a reminder that strength is not born from ease, but from enduring hardship and finding the courage to rise again. It teaches us that justice may take time, but it will come if we keep standing tall. And above all, it shows us that love can grow even in the dry dust of despair. If we do not give up on it, if this story has touched you, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, so you do not miss the next story we share together. And now, let me ask you, what would you have done if you were in Mary's shoes? Would you have fought back, or would you have lost hope? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Before we end, I want to take a moment just to speak to you, the ones listening right now. I am truly grateful for all of you who support this channel by watching and leaving kind comments. I do read them, and I notice that many of you watch these stories very late at night. I want you to remember to take care of your health. These videos are here for your entertainment, for those quiet moments when you can relax, not to take away your rest. So if it is late where you are, I hope you will turn off the screen and get some good sleep. I also need to apologize. I know I do not interact with you as often as I should. The truth is, I am not young anymore, and after long hours working on these videos, I often feel tired. That's why I take care of my own health more carefully now, and it is also why I care so much about yours. Thank you for staying with me, for listening, and for being part of this journey. Your presence here means more than you know.